Hello there and welcome to my YouTube channel. This is Ujjwal and today I'm creating these decoupage frames and I'm also using resin for the first time, so I'm super excited. So before we get started, I wanted to give you a little glimpse of this paper pack. This is a 100 GSM Decoupage Speciality paper pack and is inspired by the very trendy pour paintings that have been everywhere recently, and the results look just amazing. So I think it's just genius that they have decoupage papers inspired by pour paintings, because this way we can just reduce all the mess of pouring the paint, even though that has its own charm. But yes, if you're a non-messy person, you could just quickly grab one of these papers and decoupage a canvas or a photo frame, or even some coasters would look really nice. So I'm using two MDF frames today, and the frames measure 8 inches by 10 inches, so this A4 size is perfect for that. And to start with, I'm using this chalk paint from Itsy Bitsy, Little Birdie Crafts, and this color is called Misty Fog. And I'm just going to use a small piece of sponge and just dab the paint across the back side of the frame, using a sponge because it gives a nice texture and I can avoid those brush marks. So we're just going to cover the back side of both the frames. I'm also going in with a brush for the tiny areas, and then move on to the next step, which is actual decoupage. So I'm using Podge and matte finish here. I've selected 2 sheets of paper from the pack, and now we are going to apply the glue, the Podge, in sections to the frame. If it's a large surface, it's always better to apply Podge in sections so that the paper adheres well and the glue doesn't dry out before you put the paper on. I also like to use a little paper towel roll to just press and push the paper onto the surface. It really helps, and it also helps in getting rid of any air bubbles that might appear. You could use a brayer if you have at home, but this paper towel works pretty well for me. So you can see that I'm just applying. I did half a section first, and now I'm doing the other half here, and then I'm just going to turn it over and keep it aside to dry. So if you see some bubbles or air bubbles at this moment, do not worry, most of it will settle down when it's dry. So it's okay. So do not poke around or do not do anything about it. Just let it be, let it dry. So I'm doing the same thing with my second frame as well, just applying glue in 2 sections, and then using my paper towel to really burnish the paper in and making it stick well, and then I will let them dry. So once these are dry, I'm using a paper knife, and I put the frames on my cutting mat so that it's easier to cut out the excess. And even with the paper knife, you want to keep stable hands and just swift strokes to cut out, to get those clean edges. So once that is done, we are moving on to our next step, which is resin. So I'm using this resin from Itsy Bitsy, and it's my first time, so I'm wearing gloves. I don't know what it will entail. So I've watched a few videos, I have seen a few tutorials, and I'm just going to say even the resin bottles have some instructions, so I'm just going to go in there and do this thing. So I'm using 2 paper cups here so that I can measure out equal amounts. The resin and the hardener needs to be in 1:1 ratio, so equal amounts. And then I'm using a wooden spoon to just mix both the things thoroughly. Now there are different types of resins available. They all have different properties. Some take more time to dry, some take less time to dry. So make sure you know which resin you're working with. The resin that I am working with is fast drying, and it should be set in an hour. So I'm going to move fast here, and you can see I'm just pouring the resin in the middle of the frame, and then using an old card to just push it out on the sides, and then just even it out so that it's spread evenly on the frames. So now my camera did stop recording in between while I was pouring the raisins. So that's all the video I got. But I hope you got the point of how I did it. I will do a separate video on how I worked with resin in the future, because the results are really great. So now next thing I'm doing here is to create some art to put in the frames, and I found these two little quotes which I am handwriting with my Tombow brush pen. I don't want it to be very calligraphic or very fancy. I just wanted it to be very raw and kind of feed on the vibes that the frames have, you know, the kind of strong and bold vibes that the frame have. So I'm just kind of using very loose strokes here, and just kind of writing these two, and I think they turned out so well. They look great with the frames, and the finish is just perfect with the resin, and after pouring the resin it actually looks like an acrylic pour frame. So I love that I can fake my way through the whole pour painting thing. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I hope you like the papers and the technique that I worked with, and I hope you will give it a try. If you do try out something similar, don't forget to share with me. I would be really happy to see what you created inspired by these frames. So take care, and I'll see you again next time. Bye bye.